Welcome back to the third and final installment of the history of the Chrysler Hemi. It has been one heck of a journey, and out of all the engines out there that have been manufactured, I would say that the Chrysler Hemi has had the largest impact on society, which puts it up there with being among one of the greatest engines ever designed and made. That's all I can say. Let's get to this video, shall we? The history of the Chrysler Gen III Hemi. In a world burdened down with emissions regulations and fuel mileage requirements, the very last thing one would think the world needed was a new Chrysler Hemi engine. Isn't this the time to look towards the future and not the past? Could a new style Hemi survive in this day and age? The answer is a resounding yes. Previously, we discussed how, thanks to Tom Hoover, the second generation Hemi engine was developed to be a race-only engine to compete in NASCAR, and how that race engine eventually wound up in street cars to homologate it for NHRA and AHRA competition in addition to NASCAR. We also discussed the overall dominance of the 426 Hemi and how it was eventually banned from NASCAR competition, along with all big block engines due to the insane performance and safety concerns they created. Eventually, the Hemi found its niche in top fuel drag racing and is still going strong into this day. The street Hemi was produced from 1966 until 1971, and although it was primarily a toned-down race engine, it wasn't too bad as a street engine. It would be 32 years before the world would see a Chrysler Hemi engine produced on the assembly lines again. During that time, it was Chrysler's LA engine that was doing the brunt of the work. Beginning in 1964, the LA engine was released to the world as a 273 cubic inch V8. Over the years, it's taken form as the 318, 340, and 360 engine we've known throughout the 1970s and 80s. This engine even found its way to NASCAR as the Hemi replacement due to the powers that be imposing a 6-liter displacement limit. That's when Chrysler gave us the 355 NASCAR engine. In the 1990s, the LA engine received a series of upgrades and was dubbed the Magnum. This upgraded engine served as the base for many V6, V8, and V10 configurations. Yes, even that V10 Viper engine. The Magnum engine became the staple for powering the then Dodge Ram pickup truck line. Getting into the 2000s, the Ram was in its third generation and the Magnum was knocking on the door of being 35 years old. The rising need for cleaner emissions, higher fuel economy, and lower production costs meant that the engine's days were numbered. In stepped Bob Lee, Chrysler's Vice President of Powertrain Product Engineering. Bob knew that it was time for a redesign of Chrysler's V8 engine line. Ford had already stepped away from pushrod engines years ago with the introduction of the modular overhead cam engines, and by this time it was already 10 years old. GM revamped their venerable small block V8 by developing the LS1, a new generation V8 that retained the pushrod setup. Chrysler was faced with a choice on which direction to go. Do they develop a new generation pushrod engine or go overhead camshafts? What configuration would give the best power and torque while remaining clean and economical? Strangely enough, Bob found inspiration in the most unlikely of sources, the Porsche 911 series. One thing to keep in mind is that Chrysler in no way invented the hemispherical combustion chamber, nor did they have a monopoly on producing such engines. They only trademarked the name. The truth was that many cars used this type of combustion chamber setup with great success, and the Porsche 911 was one of them. Using codename 901 that was later changed to 911, and that's another video for another time, Porsche's air-cooled flat six-cylinder was introduced for their 1965 model year 911. It featured overhead camshafts, well, they were on the sides, but you know what I mean, and hemispherical combustion chambers. Displacement was 2 liters, and it cranked out 148 horsepower. This engine evolved over the years of its existence, but kept the basic air-cooled overhead camshaft Hemi-headed configuration. By the time it was finally retired in 1998, it had grown to 3.6 liters and produced 296 horsepower in normally aspirated form and 402 horsepower in twin turbo form in 1997. This engine powered what was now the 993 that ran from 1995 to 1998 and served as the inspiration for the new V8. The 993 engine generated a lot of power for its size, even normally aspirated, while remaining efficient and clean. Everything the Ram trucks needed. An efficient, clean-running V8 that was powerful enough to provide the power and torque a truck required. Bob and his team concluded that for their requirements, a V8 with a hemispherical combustion chamber would offer the most bang for buck. But they wouldn't simply take the existing LA engine and slap a pair of Hemi heads on it. This was going to be a completely new engine. Another concern was displacement. I mean, after all, by 2003, anytime someone mutters the name Hemi, our minds immediately veer off to imagine the king of cubes, the 426 Hemi. But in an age of low emissions and fuel economy, the replacement would not be displacement. Chrysler settled on a very smart 5.7 liters or 345 cubic inches. The block for these new 5.7 Hemis would be cast iron. Since this engine would be mass-produced and would see its way into a variety of vehicles, keeping it cast iron would not only provide some durability, but also be cost-effective. During the design phase, Bob and his team were able to consult the father of the original 426 Hemi, Tom Hoover, on how to best design the engine. After reviewing the needs and goals of the new Hemi engine, the team collectively came out with 3 goals. The first would be to raise the position of the camshaft. In a Hemi engine that isn't overhead cam, valve train is critical. The intake and exhaust valves had to reside at a certain angle that isn't very conventional. The early Hemi engines addressed the issue with a short, long arm rocker configuration that worked, but wasn't the best at efficiency. Raising the camshaft would allow for shorter push rods and a rocker arm design that replaces short, long rocker arms with equal length rockers. You can see how high the hydraulic roller camshaft sits, causing the roller lifters to lay almost horizontally. This saved horsepower as well as reduced the risk of a bent push rod. Goal number 2 would be to modify the combustion chamber to incorporate a squish area to increase drivability during low speeds and under light loads. This mod would also help reduce emissions. Goal number 3 entailed a twin spark plug design. The first one would fire right before top dead center like it was supposed to, but the second plug would fire shortly after the first plug to further ignite any unburned gases, further increasing efficiency and reducing emissions. The left and right cylinder heads are manufactured from a single casting and machined to make the right and left sides. The combustion chambers were a different story altogether. Upon initial inspection, it's easy to see that they were very different from your traditional Chrysler Hemi engine. It had the dome, which was shallow, and the sides were taken in to increase the squish area, so the diameter wasn't particularly round like the predecessors. Many enthusiasts will even go as far as to say that this is not a real Hemi engine.
No. No. Mm-mm. Mm-mm. No. 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 Hell no. 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 I refuse. No. No.
However, this was the type of combustion chamber needed to work with today's fuels and meet today's standards as far as mileage and emissions were concerned. And even at 85 cc's, it produced a healthy 9.6 to 1 compression ratio. The valves were held closed by a set of beehive valve springs and opened by a hydraulic roller camshaft that sported a 472 lift intake and 460 exhaust. By the time Chrysler engineers were finished with their design, it shared very little with its predecessors, including the Porsche engine that inspired it. Overall, it was still a Hemi. In fact, Chrysler gave it the Hemi name, but for marketing purposes, expressed it in all caps. The square intake ports measured 161 cc's, flowed roughly between 250 and 280 CFM, and fed the cylinder through a 2-inch intake valve. The square exhaust ports measured 55 cc's, flowed between 160 and 180 CFM through a 4.850 solid exhaust valve. Let's take a look at some more aspects of the new Hemi. The engine block would benefit from what's known as a deep skirt design, meaning that the crankcase portion of the block would extend well past the crankshaft centerline. This would provide strength by forming a sort of girdle as well as allowing for cross-bolted mains. The pistons were cast aluminum and transferred power to the nodular iron crankshaft via powdered metal connecting rods. The intake manifold was referred to as an integral air-fuel module. This is because it was a plastic monstrosity comprised of several individual components with the sole purpose of distributing the intake air to all the cylinders and to do it quietly to keep the throttle noises down. The entire assembly weighed 13.7 pounds, much lighter than an aluminum unit would have been. Air was fed to the engine via an 80mm throttle body. The first configuration of the new Hemi engine became the upgrade engine for the 2003 Dodge Ram pickup, replacing the LA-based 5.9 Magnum, but still offered alongside the 4.7 PowerTech overhead cam V8 and 3.7 Magnum V6. Producing 345 horsepower and 375 pound-feet of torque, it produced 100 more horsepower and 40 more pound-feet of torque. A much welcomed improvement, and the new Hemi was just getting started. The new Hemi engine added to an already nice package in the Ram pickup, and the truck took Motor Trend's Truck of the Year honors in 2003. The powertrain received high praises from all over. For 2004, the Hemi expanded to the Dodge Durango and became the upgrade engine with a slightly lower horsepower rating at 330. In 2005, the Jeep Grand Cherokee received the 330-horse Hemi, while the Dodge Magnum RT and Chrysler 300C were treated to 10 more horses with their Hemis, a no doubt key player to the 300 garnering Motor Trend's Car of the Year top honors. This is also the first year of Chrysler's Multi-Displacement System, or MDS. Introduced in the 2005 300C, Dodge Magnum, and Jeep Grand Cherokee, the MDS eventually became available on all 5.7 equipped vehicles with an automatic transmission from 2005 to 2009. All Ram trucks were excluded. In a move to improve fuel economy, the MDS will shut down 4 cylinders when the throttle is closed or the vehicle is cruising at steady speeds. For the performance-minded, Chrysler took things up a notch with the introduction of the 300C SRT8, a buffed-up 300C equipped with a 6.1-liter Hemi that cranked out 425 horsepower. Now, this isn't merely a bored-out 5.7. The last thing anyone wants is an engine suffering from thin cylinder walls, so they started out with a completely new engine block with a 4.055-inch bore versus the 5.7's 3.92-inch bore, and retained the same 3.58-inch stroke to achieve the 6.1-liter displacement, or 372 cubic inches. The engine blocks were painted Hemi orange to mainly help them receive the proper machining on the assembly line, but it's also a nice touch for their performance engine. They also have a 6.1L cast on the driver's side of the engine block. The rotating assembly consists of a forged steel crankshaft and full-floating hyper-eutectic pistons on powdered metal connecting rods. The camshaft was pumped up with more lift and duration with a 571 intake and 551 exhaust. The cylinder heads featured a smaller 74cc combustion chamber for a 10.2-to-1 compression ratio, with larger 188 square intake and 194 D-shaped exhaust ports. Valve sizes were 208 intake and 1.65 exhaust. The plastic intake was replaced with a barrel-shaped long runner aluminum intake and 80mm throttle body. The intake combination was good for power from 2,000 all the way up to the 6,200 RPM redline. The entire engine package produced 425 horsepower and 420 pound-feet of torque, a much-needed shot in the arm for a car like the 300C. The 6.1 SRT8 engine really boosted the car's reputation. By the way, MDS was not an option for the 6.1. In 2006, the 5.7 continued in all of the previous vehicles and added the new Dodge Charger RT and Jeep Commander. The Charger received the 340 horsepower version, while the Jeep retained the 330 horsepower engine. Like the Charger's sister vehicle, there's also an SRT8 option for the Charger to make room for the 425 horsepower 6.1-liter Hemi. The 5.7 Hemi found its way into the Chrysler Aspen for 2007. We were also introduced to the new Dodge Challenger, which were all SRT8s, meaning that it received the 6.1 Hemi exclusively. 2008 was the last year for this version of the 5.7 Hemi. Through its tenure, it made a pretty good impact on the industry, but it suffered from some problems. The biggest issue being dropped valve seats that seemed to have happened most if that particular engine suffered from overheating problems. It was enough of a problem for a recall to be issued on all 2005 to 2007 Hemis to have the issue addressed. However, the vast majority of the 5.7 and 6.1 Hemis enjoy long lives of up to 200,000 miles or more. During the tenure of the 2003-2008 5.7 Hemi, Chrysler engineers took plenty of time to observe. Through their observations, they found what worked and what needed improvement. They got to work on the new and improved version of the 5.7 Hemi, codenamed Eagle. Starting with an all-new engine block, the Eagle block was cast to be stronger than its predecessor, evidenced by its 31-pound weight increase. These new blocks also received a 5.7 cast in the same place on the side as the 6.1 engine. The rotating assembly also benefited from beefier connecting rods. The cylinder heads were next on the redesign list. Combustion chamber volume was decreased from 85 cc's to 65 cc's, that increased compression ratios from 9.6 to 1 to 10.5 to 1. Intake and exhaust valves are increased to 205 and 155 inches respectively. The ports in the new Eagle heads are redesigned to increase flow as they more closely resemble the SRT8 heads with its rectangular intake and D-shaped exhaust ports. These new Eagle heads even outflow the SRT8 heads. The new Eagle engine retained the MDS system, but also added a variable camshaft timing or VCT system. This new system, like the MDS system, was designed to increase fuel economy. The VCT system advances and retards the camshaft timing as the engine is running to keep it at peak efficiency at all times. This new system made its way to all 5.7 equipped vehicles regardless of transmission. The new Eagle Hemi also received an active intake manifold. This is the long runner intake with a flapper door that will switch from long runners to short runners for better high RPM operation and continues the use of an 80mm throttle body. This intake was installed across the board in cars as well as Ram pickups. Horsepower numbers varied slightly from vehicle to vehicle, but it ranged from 363 all the way to 399 and 394 to 410 pound-feet of torque. Now, in 2009, Dodge offered a drag pack option for the Challenger, but with no Hemi engine, just the 5.9-liter Magnum wedge engine. However, for the 2010 model year, Dodge refined the package to feature the 6.1 Hemi. This engine was treated to a forged steel crankshaft and connecting rods, forged pistons, revised valve lift in the hydraulic roller camshaft, and a modified high ram intake manifold. The 6.1 SRT8 engine continued until 2010. While it was a great engine, the horsepower wars were escalating exponentially, and Chrysler needed to keep up. Enter the 6.4-liter engine, codenamed Apache. Displacing 392 cubes, its size is the only thing that it shares with the Gen I 392. Starting with a fresh block, they utilize a 4.09-inch bore and a 3.72-inch stroke. The rotating assembly consists of a forged steel crankshaft, powdered metal I-beam connecting rods with cracked cap design, joined to full flooding hypereutectic pistons complete with oil squirters to promote cooling. Compression ratio is a stout 10.9 to 1. The cylinder heads are basically an improved version of the awesome flowing Eagle heads. With 73.4cc combustion chambers, they feature a 2.14 intake and 1.65 exhaust valves, making them one of the best flowing third-gen Hemi heads with a 340 CFM intake port. The 6.1 hydraulic roller camshaft has an increased duration of 286 degrees for the intake and 288 exhaust, while the valve lift matched the intake lift at 571, but exhaust was decreased slightly at 536 inches. The 6.1 uses the same active intake as the 5.7 Eagle, as well as the MDS and VCT. The same rules apply. The MDS will only be used on automatic equipped vehicles, while the VCT will apply to all. Final pound numbers for its release in 2011 vehicles was 470 horsepower, 470 pound-feet of torque. It was offered only in the Dodge Challenger SRT8 that year. For 2012, in addition to the Challenger SRT8, Chrysler extended the application of the 6.4 into the 2012 Charger SRT8, Chrysler 300 SRT8, and Jeep Grand Cherokee SRT8. Things pretty much remained the same for the cars throughout the 2014 model year. For Ram's truck line in 2015, the Cummins diesel is generally the engine of choice for those looking to pull heavy loads. However, there are those who may do some medium to heavy duty work with their trucks and don't necessarily require the grunt of a diesel. Chrysler saw the need for an upgraded horsepower engine and included a heavy duty 6.4 engine spec'd out for the 2500 series trucks and up. Starting once again with a new engine block with a thicker casting, shorter water jackets, and a higher nickel content for added strength, this one would be known as the BG or BGE block. They're easy to tell, as these initials standing for a big gas engine are cast either on the side or the rear of the block. They're also painted black. The rotating assembly is unchanged from the standard 392. It's the cylinder heads where things begin to change. While still remaining the dual spark plug arrangement and valve size, they're good for a 10-to-1 compression ratio. Cast from 356 T6 aluminum, they're a bit more resilient to higher temperatures, as opposed to the heads on all other Hemis made from T319 aluminum. The camshaft was made a little smaller and geared more towards low-end torque rather than horsepower. The intake manifold is also different, even though it still utilized the variable runner design. With a top-mounted throttle body, it's made to work with the camshaft to deliver torque down low in the 3600 to 5000 RPM range. For the 2500 and 3500 Ram pickups, the 6.4 was good for 410 horsepower at 5600 RPM and 429 pound-feet of torque at 4000 RPM. For the chassis cab, Engine output was slightly lower at 370 horsepower with the same torque numbers. Twenty 2015 also brought us one of the most significant variations of the Gen III Hemi in the form of the newest addition to the stable, the 6.2-liter Hellcat. When I say the most significant variation, I mean that at this juncture, Chrysler, well, Dodge in particular, tired of being stuck in the muscle car friend zone with Mustangs and Camaros bringing in the big horsepower numbers. So they stopped trying to play nice with everyone and decided to step out and do what they used to do, dominate. They confidently walk into the engine room and unhook the collar on the 800-pound gorilla they apparently had hidden in the closet, gave him a 55-gallon drum of espresso from Costco with an Everclear chaser, and unleashed him to the world with one purpose. Smash. And that's exactly what the Hellcat did. Named after the Grumman F-6F Hellcat fighter plane from World War II, this engine of the same name starts with the same 6.4 Apache BGE thick, high nickel content engine block, but with thicker webbing and also with longer water jackets that go all the way down to encompass the piston even at bottom dead center. The bore remains at 4.09 inches, but with a shorter 3.58-inch stroke like the 5.7-liter Hemi. However, it doesn't use the 5.7 nodular iron crankshaft. This new one is forged steel. The connecting rods are still powdered metal, but are of a thicker casting with upgraded rod bolts. The full-floating hyper-eutectic pistons are replaced with full-floating forged pistons with oil squirters to promote cooling. The material atop the piston is also thicker for added strength in addition to the built-in support ribs. Cylinder heads are the same as the 6.4 passenger car engine, but are cast in the more resilient 356 T6 aluminum. With the Hellcat-specific pistons, compression ratio is 9.5 to 1. The valve train is operated by a new camshaft with a 571 536-inch lift for the intake and exhaust, respectively, and a duration of 278 and 304 degrees. MDS is not used on any of these blower engines, but they do continue to use VCT. This bulletproof combo is topped off by a 2.4-liter twin-screw supercharger developed by IHI specifically for Chrysler. It's capable of 11.6 pounds of boost in stock form. It's equipped with internal charge coolers that keep the inlet air temps below 140 degrees Fahrenheit and is sealed for life with its own synthetic oil supply. Fed through a 92mm throttle body, it can spin up to 14,600 RPM, pumping 6,000 gallons of air into the engine per minute. This entire combination works together to produce a whopping 707 horsepower and 650 pound-feet of torque. The first cars to receive this beast engine were the 2015 Challenger SRT Hellcat and the 2015 Charger SRT Hellcat with glowing results. The Charger Hellcat official FCA performance numbers were 3.7 seconds for 0-60 with an 11.8 second quarter mile. The Challenger also posted a 3.7060, but blistered the drag strip with an 11.75 mile on street tires and 1080s on drag radials. For comparison, the Camaro ZL1 ran a 12.3 and the Shelby GT500 posted in an 1180. The overall reception of the Hellcat was nothing short of electrifying. At the time, the Hellcat Challenger and Charger were two of the most powerful vehicles from the factory on the streets for under $65,000. Usually a vehicle like this would be touted as a special edition, meaning that its production numbers would be limited, but not Chrysler. There were over 9,000 orders for these cars, with Chrysler fulfilling 8,502 of them. The Challenger led the sales with 7,168 units produced and 1,334 units for the Charger. ', 2016 brought us the latest Challenger drag pack with two special Hemi engines. The first was a 5.7-liter or 354 cubic inch all-aluminum Hemi with a 3-liter Whipple twin-screw blower mounted on top to supply the forced induction. For those who preferred their engines naturally aspirated, there was an all-aluminum Gen III 426 Hemi available as well. Other than the drag pack, it was pretty much more of the same for all model lines. There weren't many changes to any of the engines, because why mess with a good thing, right? Hemi-powered vehicles were the hottest thing going and showed no signs of slowing down. In fact, things were picking up. 2017 was more of the same. There was a Hemi for every taste, from mild to wild, with Hemi-powered vehicles appearing everywhere at this point. For 2018, Chrysler stepped things up once again with the introduction of 3 new Hemi-powered vehicles through its various outlets. The first being the Durango SRT. The versatile Durango has been a part of Dodge's lineup since 1998, entering its 3rd generation in 2010. It received the 5.7 Hemi in 2011 for the Durango RT and was pretty much a mainstay in the lineup. However, in 2018, things changed. Dodge got hold of the 6.4, now with 475 horsepower, and dropped it under the hood for not only a useful SUV, but with all-wheel drive, it's a useful SUV that's a straight riot to drive on the streets. With a 0-60 time of 4.6 seconds and a 13.2 quarter mile, the 6.4 Durango SRT definitely hauled the freight. Speaking of riots, the folks at Jeep weren't about to be left out in the cold. Since the Grand Cherokee shared the same WK2 platform with the Durango, Jeep decided to take things a step further. Instead of the 6.4 BGE engine, they opted for the 707 horsepower of the 6.2-liter Hellcat engine and called this all-wheel drive beast the SRT Trackhawk. And what a beast it was, with a 0-60 of 3.3 seconds and blistered the quarter mile with a time of 11.7 seconds. But there is yet one more cruise missile to unleash upon the public, and this one was a bunker buster in the form of the 2018 Challenger SRT Demon. Dodge wanted 2 things from the Demon: 9-second quarter mile times and to lift the front wheels during launch. 2 things that have never been achieved with a production car. For those kinds of times, this Hemi had to be something special. So they took the 6.2-liter Hemi Hellcat engine and made it stronger with a beefed-up rotating assembly to handle the extra power. The cylinder heads remained the same with the new camshaft specific to the Demon. On top, the 2.4-liter blower was replaced with a larger unit, displacing 2.7 liters. Boost pressure is raised from 11 psi to 14.5. With the compression ratio remaining at 9.5 to 1, the new Demon engine produces 808 horsepower and 717 pound-feet of torque on 91 octane pump gas, and will belt out a massive 840 horsepower and 770 pound-feet of torque when running race fuel. The end result was beyond anything produced by, well, anyone. Whereas the SRT Hellcat Challenger was the 6th most powerful production car in the world, the Demon was the 4th. When that power is transferred to the pavement, 0-60 comes up in a mere 2.3 seconds. 100 miles an hour follows shortly at the 5.1 second mark, and the quarter mile is ripped off in a mind-boggling 9.65 seconds at a blistering 140 miles an hour, making it the fastest production car in the world at the time. And yes, it can lift the front wheels during launch. For 2019, the Durango SRT and Jeep SRT Trackhawk continued as is, and the SRT Demon was a one and done for 2018. The Challenger Hellcat got a 10 horsepower increase through improved breathing from a new dual snorkel hood, but that's not the only upgrade. For 2019, Dodge decided to take the Demon engine, 2.7-liter blower and all, and place it in a basic Hellcat to come up with the Hellcat Red Eye. With a slightly more restricted intake, the Hellcat Red Eye produced a still formidable 797 horsepower and 707 pound-feet of torque. They took the Demon underpinnings and placed it under a drag-focused street Challenger powered by a 485 horsepower 6.4 Hemi and called it the Scat Pack 1320. For 2020, everything pretty much remained the same, although the Red Eye engine made its way into the Charger to make the Charger Hellcat Red Eye, making it one of the fastest production sedans in the world. Dodge also released the Challenger SRT Superstock. The Superstock was powered by the same Hellcat Hemi that powered the Red Eye, but was slightly tuned a little more to make 810 horsepower. One other Challenger Dodge offered was the latest version of the Challenger Drag Pack, this time powered by an all-aluminum supercharged 354 Hemi. Over the years, Chrysler has changed ownership a few times. It's not really surprising, as many of the American auto manufacturers have been bought and sold in order to stay afloat. Many well-known brands have even been cut in order to drop what they consider to be dead weight. Plymouth, for starters. Ford closed down Mercury. GM killed off Pontiac, Oldsmobile, Saturn, and Saab. In 1998, Chrysler was acquired by Daimler-Benz for $36 million. While we got some good cars out of the merger, things didn't really work out for the two companies, and Daimler sold Chrysler in 2007 to Cerberus at a loss for $7.4 billion. Then in 2008, the recession hit, causing Chrysler to file for bankruptcy in 2009. Through a series of government loans, Chrysler emerged from the financial crisis spread pretty thin with a coalition of owners. In 2014, Chrysler was purchased by Fiat and became Fiat Chrysler Automobiles, or FCA. They continued on as a company until 2021, when FCA merged with the French-owned Peugeot SA, or PSA Group, renaming the conglomerate Stellantis. Headquartered in Amsterdam, Stellantis consists of 16 automotive brands overall. For the 2021 model year, things heated up once again with the introduction of 6 new Hemi-powered vehicles, getting crazier as we go. First, there's the Jeep Wagoneer and Grand Wagoneer, 2 plus-size SUVs that are entering the ultra-luxury realm. The Wagoneer comes equipped with a 5.7-liter Hemi, producing 392 horsepower, while the Grand Wagoneer gets the 471 horsepower 6.4 Hemi to move all that weight around. The next Jeep model was the Wrangler Rubicon 392, also sporting a 6.4 Hemi boasting 470 horsepower. Now, Ram trucks have been pretty quiet. After the introduction of the 6.4 BGE in 2015, the truck guys haven't had much to complain about. I mean, generally, if they want to go fast, they'll park the truck and jump into a Challenger or Charger. The last fast Ram truck was the Dodge Ram SRT-10, a rear-wheel drive Ram with a 500 horsepower Viper V10 under the hood that ran from 2004 to 2006. However, this new truck would be nothing like the SRT-10. Starting with their 5th generation truck, they took their Ram 1500 Rebel and stuffed the Hellcat engine under the hood, making the Ram TRX Launch Edition. At 702 horsepower, this was the first performance pickup since the Ram SRT-10. Dodge, being the ever-steady rebel of the bunch, was determined not to be outdone and took their Durango SRT up a notch and stuffed the 710 horsepower Hellcat engine in it, making the Durango SRT Hellcat. Unfortunately, this was a single-year-only model run. Rounding out the 6th vehicle was Dodge's latest Challenger Drag Pack. There have been minor updates to the car, but the biggest change is a revised 3-liter blower. Horsepower and numbers for the Drag Pack have been unreliable at best, which is why I never gave any concrete numbers. But it's safe to say that it's cranking out numbers in the 1200 to 1500 range, but that's only a guess. Word started to get around in late 2021 that 2023 would be the last model year for the Hemi as far as passenger cars were concerned. It really wasn't a surprise to any of us. The Challenger and Charger platforms were starting to get pretty dated, and there were no prototypes on the horizon. However, the people at Dodge wanted to let the world know that they weren't done yet, with the release of the 2022 Charger and Challenger Hellcat Jailbreak Edition, complete with an 807 horsepower Hellcat Hemi, thanks to some creative tuning. The standard Hellcat is also still available if you want to call 797 horsepower standard. For 2023, Dodge announced the last call for Chargers and Challengers. I'm sure Ram Trucks and Jeep will do something similar. With it being the last year for the Dodge vehicles, they're offering a variety of special edition cars, but nothing new as far as the Hemi engine itself is concerned. You can still get a 5.7 standard Hemi, a 6.4 392 Scat Pack, SRT Hellcat, Red Eye, Super Stock Challenger, or Jailbreak. If you fancy an SUV, Jeep still has a variety of Hemi-powered vehicles, including their Trackhawk. If you still want a Ram TRX, you better get your order in while you can, because after 2023, there will be big changes. However, thanks to Mopar.com, many of these Hemis are available in the form of crate engines as long as there is a demand for them. You have a choice of the 5.7, the 392, Hellcrate 6.2 or Hellcrate Red Eye 6.2, and the all-aluminum Hellefant 426. This third-generation Hemi engine, what can I say? It appeared on the scene in 2003, beginning in trucks and finally found its way into cars and SUVs. In 2015, things heated up with the introduction of the Hellcat that plunged us into the greatest muscle car era since 1970. While the Hemi may be gone from the world stage, it will evoke the fondest memories from muscle car enthusiasts. Chrysler built this engine to take full advantage of its design, and boy did it ever. You can have your W16s, your dual overhead camshafts, and your Tesla Plaids. Give me a Hellcat with that infamous blower whine. There will be nothing, and I mean nothing, like the 20-year run of American muscle we just witnessed. The Big Three gave us the best they had to offer and got better each year. We were inundated with loud, rumbly V8s that could run 11s, 10s, and sometimes even 9s right off the showroom floor. There will never be an era like this again, which is why we must always seize these moments in life. Make your best memories today, because your best time is right now. Don't get me wrong, there are still plenty of American muscle and sports cars available to purchase brand new, but the Chrysler Hemi will be sorely missed from among them. However, there will still be plenty roaming the streets, and will be for a good while. The Chrysler Hemi left the premises as the Alpha, the winner, the greatest of all time. It was one hell of a run. So what's next? Stellantis has already introduced their Hurricane 6-cylinder engine as a replacement. I'm sure it's going to be a great power plant and plenty fast. It's just not the Hemi. I know that I may sound stuck on this engine, but don't worry, I'm not. This is because life goes on. Hemi or no Hemi, while I love watching the new Hemi products emerge from Chrysler, instead of mourning the loss of the Hemi, I'm going to be happy that I got to experience the greatest muscle car renaissance in history. This isn't the end. We'll get through this just like we got through the OPEC crisis, or the end of the first muscle car era in the mid-70s. We survived unreasonable smog laws and sealed carburetors. We survived catalytic converters and OBD2. And we'll survive this. Because in the automotive world, we improvise. And just when you think you have us figured out, we come back better than ever. So here's to the Chrysler Hemi. In a world that didn't see a need for you, you came in and showed us why we absolutely love you so much. Rest easy, Hemi. The greatest of all time. The last of the pure muscle. Until we meet again.